Hey everybody and welcome back to the channel, and today we are talking about the second place curse in Valorant. Now if you don't know, like any form of competition or sports or esports, Valorant has its own superstitions. There was the 9-3 curse that was very prominent in 2021, where any map that went to 9-3, the team that had the 3 would end up winning in the second half. But that curse has been talked about too much recently because it hasn't really been as consistent as it once was. But one curse that has been consistent throughout the entire time of Valorant international tournaments is the second place curse. So the curse is basically whichever team places second in an international tournament in the very next tournament will not do very well, or in some cases on the board not even qualify. And the main inspiration for me making this video is I saw a post on the website VLR, which if you don't know is the kind of hub of the internet for all things Valorant esports. And it was a post that was talking about the second place curse and saying how because of this Loud will not do very well in the next tournament, which is the upcoming VCT Masters Tokyo, because they came in second place at lock-in, losing to Fnatic 3-2. And while I understand superstitions and all that, especially in sports, it did kind of bug me because now you're just kind of underrating a team that is very good, that is already in the playoff stage for Masters Tokyo, just because of some kind of superstition. And as I said in my first video about VCT Masters Tokyo, if there's any team that can break the second place curse, it's Loud. They will not have to play in groups because they are the first seed from the VCT Americas League after winning the grand final in their league's playoffs. So I understand the second place curse aspect of it, but Loud have already done very well in the Americas League, and this is a very different VCT from what we saw a year ago. So what we're going to do for this video is I have the grand final from every single international tournament that has happened in Valorant so far, aside from game changers and off-season kind of stuff, and we're going to look at how this curse has affected teams, if it's a real curse, is it actually going to continue into Tokyo. So first up we have 2021, the very first year of international play, because 2020 happened, the whole COVID thing, so we didn't have any international tournaments that year, despite that being the first year of Valorant. And also what I've done is shown what happened to the winning team in the next tournament. Because one thing that I also think we have to keep in mind of this is it might not just be a second place curse, it might also be Valorant has a lot of parity in it. In Valorant so far, we have not seen a repeat winner. Every single international tournament has had a brand new winner. And I've really liked that about Valorant esports so far. It's really interesting to me when it's just a new team every time. Obviously, I have my favorite teams that I want to win, but I also like it if they're not the ones winning, then we see a different team, different players win each time. In Valorant so far, we've only had one player win an international tournament twice, and that was Chronicle. He did it with Gambit, and then he did it with Fnatic and Lock-in. So while I understand the superstition behind this curse, I also think it's interesting that we haven't seen a back-to-back winner yet, or at least a repeat winner in terms of teams. So I think that's one aspect of this curse that I'm going to be talking about. So the grand final for the very first Valorant International Tournament, which was VCT Masters Reykjavik, we had Sentinels versus Fnatic in the very first grand final. It was a 3-0 for Sentinels, completing their streak of not losing a map that entire tournament, and it was a heartbreaker for Fnatic, which up until lock-in really struggled to get back to that spot. And that shows right away heading into the next tournament, which was VCT Masters Berlin, where Fnatic did not even qualify, losing in their Challengers League, while Sentinels placed 5th to 8th at Berlin, losing 2-0 to Envy in that tournament, another North American team who would become Optic. And in that same tournament in Berlin, Envy would make it all the way to grand finals and lose 3-0 to Gambit. This was a big tournament for North American teams, Envy making it all the way to grand finals, almost making a back-to-back North American win in international tournaments, but did not happen. 100 Thieves were also there, and they performed very well, but they did not make it to grand finals. It ended up being Envy, and they lost 3-0 to Gambit, and Gambit looked very, very good. They looked like they easily could win the next tournament, which would be Champions. And in the next tournament, which ended up being Champions 2021 in Berlin, Envy placed 9th to 12th, losing in the group stage, did not have a good tournament that year, so that's the curse striking again. While Gambit had a much better tournament, but did end up not taking it, they placed second at Champions, losing 3-2 to Ascend. And moving on to that tournament, we see that Ascend did take that one 3-2, as I said. It was a very back and forth grand final, and up to that point, the best grand final of Valorant so far, because as we can see, 3-0, 3-0, 3-2, much more exciting than just a clean sweep in the previous two grand finals. But then, in the future, both of these teams ended up not qualifying for the first tournament of 2022, which ended up being back in Reykjavik. Ascend had a very rough 2022, starting off really poorly and ended up having some pretty drastic roster changes. They did not qualify for any of the 3 international tournaments that happened in 2022. And same goes for Gambit. They actually had to drop the Gambit banner altogether together because of the whole Russia invading Ukraine thing and them being a primarily Russian team. So a lot of geopolitical reasons, there's a lot of turmoil there with some of the Russian teams or teams with Russian players. So that was a whole thing that ended up really messing up Gambit, which ended up being called themselves M3C, Masters 3 champions. Masters 3 being Masters Berlin, which I kind of hate that it's called Masters 3 because it's the second international tournament, but Masters 1 is technically just each region having their own Masters, but I think that's kind of stupid to call that Masters. Whatever, it's the branding. It was M3C. And yeah, they didn't qualify for Reykjavik or any international tournament at all in 2022. Very rough year for that team as well. So a team that looked really dominant in 2021, almost winning back-to-back championships, they just couldn't do it, and there was a lot of reasons why, and it's unfortunate because they're a very good team. But now a lot of those players are doing well on different rosters. And then 2022 happens, and we have the very first tournament of that year, which was back in Reykjavik. We had Optic, who was previously Envy, that team being back in the grand finals, and the Brazilian super team in Loud. Now Loud were absolutely favorites going into that tournament. They actually beat Optic the very first time they faced in that tournament earlier in the bracket, but Optic came back, established dominance, and they won that one 3-0. And then in the very next tournament, which would end up being VCT Masters Copenhagen, Loud lost in the group stage, losing to Optic. So some repetition there, and that was the start of quite a good rivalry of that year. And then Optic would have a much better tournament at Copenhagen than Loud did. They placed third, losing to PaperX and FPX, two teams that went to the grand final. Speaking of that grand final, FPX would take that one 3-2. PaperX very, very close to winning that one, but they just could not close out that last map. FPX looked a lot better and took home the third international tournament win for EMEA. And then for Champions 2023, in the next tournament, PaperX with that second place curse, they lost in the group stages at Champions, not winning a single match. And then FPX, like Optic, had a much better next tournament. At Champions, they placed fourth. And then at Champions 2022, we saw the rematch from Reykjavik, Optic versus Loud again. And Loud would get the revenge, long-awaited revenge. It took them a while to beat Optic again after Reykjavik. They took that one 3-1, very good tournament from Loud there. And that is the last international tournament before the VCT went franchising, and we now have the format that we have today, where we have the 3 international leagues and the Masters tournaments being the international tournaments. So how did those teams do in the next turn? Well, Optic, having that second place curse, they did not win lock-in. They placed 5th to 8th, losing to Loud, actually. But the one caveat with that is that they were Energy, and they did have 2 different players, so it's not the same exact team, it's a different org, but it still has most of the players having Crashies, FNS, and Victor. So we can still kind of count it in that second place curse range, but they didn't have a bad tournament either. And they made it really hard on Loud too, Loud having to take that one 2-1 in overtime of the last map, and Energy winning their previous 2 matches before that match, so they didn't do terribly, which is what happens a lot in this side of the board for that second place curse. And then we get to the current year, 2023, we have the very first international tournament of the year, Lock-In. And Fnatic finally won their tournament, 3-2 versus Loud. Loud almost reverse sweeped them. It was very close. It went into overtime. That was the best grand finals I've seen in Valorant so far, and it was a great way to set the stage for the rest of the year. So, Loud, they came in second place. They have the second place curse. Is it going to affect them? So to predict how the answer to that question is going to go down, I have what has happened in the year so far to these 2 teams heading into Masters Tokyo. First off with Loud, who have the second place curse. They went 8-1 in the regular season, only losing to Energy, but they did eventually beat them in the playoffs in the grand finals to take the #1 seed in Americas. So if the second place curse was going to affect them, it hasn't affected them yet. It didn't affect them in the regular league. They performed very well the entire time, only dropping that one match, and they swept Energy in the grand finals of their Americas League playoffs. So it's not like the second place curse affected them in the regular season, but the second place curse does happen at the international tournaments, so we will see. Being the #1 seed, they have already passed the group stage, so they, at the very least, aren't going to have horrible results, because even if they drop their first 2 matches, which I highly doubt is going to happen, Loud is a very good team, they will still not have done as poorly as a lot of what's happened over here. And then we have Fnatic, who went 9-0 in the regular season. They are the 2nd seed in EMEA because they lost to Team Liquid in the grand finals of the EMEA playoffs. A little bit embarrassing loss from there, but they are still in the playoff stage because of their win at Lock-In, which secures them a spot. So they already bypassed the group stage. They're already safe. So with Fnatic going 9-0 in the regular season, only losing the 1 match during playoffs, we could see a back-to-back win in Valorant finally. Am I exactly betting on them? I'm not exactly sure. I want to see how the tournament starts to really know who I think is going to do very well. But if there's any two teams that I don't want to bet on performing poorly, it's Loud and Fnatic. Loud have been performing very well all year. Lock-in, going to grand finals, almost winning on home turf would have been an amazing win for them, but it doesn't end up happening. And then dominating in their league and then making it to playoffs, making it to grand finals, winning grand finals, being the number 1 seed, being in playoffs. They very well could face Fnatic again. And I do not expect either of these teams to perform poorly in this tournament, so will we finally see the second place curse be broken? I don't really know for sure. I think you can easily just predict, the top seeds of each league, but I also think that's kind of boring and doesn't really take into account the randomness of these kinds of international tournaments. Valorant has had some really weird results in tournaments so far, some huge upsets, some really dominant teams, but so far we have not seen a second place team do very well at the next tournament, but I do think Loud can break that. We also haven't seen a back-to-back win. Can Fnatic break that? I think they can, but I'm not entirely confident that they do. I think they have a lot to prove. They did finally win a tournament in lock-in, but that was single elimination. They haven't won a double elimination tournament. We'll see if it happens. They very well could do it. We'll see. Anyways, that's all for today. Thank you all very much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below if you think the second place curse is real or if you think Loud is going to finally break it. Anyways, thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.